If there's anything that watching gay movies has taught me, it's that it's a very bad idea to try looking for love at a lake. Huh. Where is everybody?
Oh my god! No!
Birder is a movie about a man named Christian who is traveling alone and goes into a queer nude camp community, and while he's there, some very bad things start happening. If you're a fan of gay movies like I am, this movie might remind you of another movie that came out in 2013 called Stranger by the Lake. And while ultimately the two films are different, they're worth comparing, and I want to do that in a little bit. But in terms of my enjoyment of Birder, I thought it was just a fun little ride of a movie with a great central performance by an actor named Michael Emery. And he's tasked with a difficult role that I think he pulls off because he has to be very charismatic while also having to harbor some dark secrets. Birder is a movie that is filled with sex and nudity, and it doesn't really hold back on those elements, so that's something that you should know about. Let's talk about the comparison between this movie and Stranger by the Lake. And I will be talking about both movies with a little bit of spoilers. There's basically the general conflict, but I'm not going to be giving away major plot points. And if you're not familiar with Stranger by the Lake, it has to do with a man who is on vacation and he goes to this lake that is known for like a cruising spot. And while he's there, he meets a very dangerous entity. And so yeah, there is some overlap between both movies, but I think both movies are trying to say and do two very different things. You know, for the biggest thing, the difference is the perspective. The lead character in Stranger by the Lake is more of the everyday man, the layman, you know, and we get to see the experience of this type of dangerous thing through his perspective. Whereas Birder, we're in the villain's shoes. We're in the psychopath's shoes. And that can be a little bit harder. I mean, not a little bit, a lot harder to relate to that character. But I think for me, the reason that I've had Stranger by the Lake in my mind after all these years, I think it comes down to the perspective and that you're able to resonate easier with a character who's like the everyday man than you can with a character that is the one that is shown in Birder. I think that's why maybe Stranger by the Lake got under my skin. And once a movie like that gets under your skin, you kind of have it rattling in your mind forever. And you can see Birder in a lot of ways as a commercial version of Stranger by the Lake. And what I mean by that is that the way that the filmmaking happens in Stranger by the Lake, there's a lot of long takes. There's a lot of slow pacing in the editing and a lot of long dialogue sequences. And in Birder, things feel a lot quicker and a lot more easy to digest. And I think ultimately both films are also trying to say two different things. I think Birder explores this idea of consent in sexual relations. A Stranger by the Lake has to do more with the dangers in ignoring red flags, and that could be seen on a microscopic level or a much more grand scale. And both films approach sex in very unheld back ways. And I think that is very important too, because sex scenes can be important parts of a film. And I've said this before in other videos, but I would say that while both movies don't hold back, I think Stranger by the Lake is a much more explicit film. And from my research on Wikipedia, they were using unsimulated sex scenes in the film using body doubles. And so, yeah, Stranger by the Lake is definitely much more real. I think American movies sometimes have this prudish attitude towards sex, even though things have changed a lot. But just overall, in general, as a whole, and compared to movies that take place in other countries, there's nothing wrong with two consenting adults having sex. And consent is also the most important element in the film Birder. And another big difference is that I would say, if you're going to put these on the scales, I would say Stranger by the Lake is more of a thriller and Birder is more of a horror film. That's also where they kind of deviate. And there's a lot more genre elements, I feel like, in Birder than there is in Stranger by the Lake. I love that both movies have a lot of convergence, but ultimately there's a lot of divergence in terms of the directions that they go in. But it was nice to see a movie that kind of dealt with some similar things, but told it from a completely different perspective. I just wanted to jump in here and quickly add that there's another movie that these two movies reminded me of. It's a movie called The Ornithologist. It's a Portuguese film, and it has to do with another bird lover. And it also takes place on a lake, but that's kind of where the comparisons end, even though it's about another gay man in peril at a lake. And if you watch these movies back to back to back, you may never want to visit a lake again in your life. And one more other bonus film that you might be interested in, if you are open to watching lesbian films, there's a really fun thriller called What Keeps You Alive. Just further evidence that lakes can be very dangerous for gay people. Where is everybody? We're not doing a shirtless video.